There's been a lot of talk about the Road Warriors losing their heart or their taste for violence. Well, we never had no hearts to lose to begin with. Say, hey, Hawk, where's your brother Animal? I said, none of your business. He's collecting money. We're having a hard time finding anybody who wants to get in the four corners of doom with the Legion of Doom.
Hey there, all you savages. Welcome back to Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly Podcast, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. My name is Steve. With me, as always, is the Scum, and we got a very special show for you guys today. It's going to be a dedication to Road Warrior Hawk. We're going to talk all things Hawk. We have a bunch of special guests we wanted to have on the show today. We got Road Warrior Animal. We got some sound bites from our interview from Paul Ellering where he talks about Road Warrior Hawk specifically in the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and a special guest at the very end of our show today. We have Rachel Ellering, who very well may be the next generation of WWE superstars. Certainly has a good pedigree there. What do you think, Scum?
Absolutely, absolutely. I always come on and say each week, Steve, it's a pleasure to be back with you, my longtime tag team partner. I've dubbed us the most dangerous team in wrestling radio. Well, today we play tribute to the most dangerous team in wrestling history, the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom. We got Road Warrior Animal be here with us in a few minutes to walk through his career, to pay tribute to the 10th anniversary of the passing of his longtime partner, Road Warrior Hawk. We're really excited about that. I know you're really excited as well, and we really appreciate that he would come on and do this with us. I know all of our fans and all of our listeners are really high on the LOD, on the Road Warriors. So this is something special for you, the listeners out there of WGD Weekly.
Absolutely, Scum. Can't disagree with you there at all. Danger, Death, and the Rush of Wrestling is the name of the book from Joe Laurinaitis, also known as Road Warrior Animal. He'll be with us here very soon. Now, Scum, you know, back in the 80s, and of course before they got their start, and we hope that Road Warrior Animal will, elaborate on this and tell us some great stories from when, he was a younger guy and met up with Hawk and they became friends, and hopefully we'll go through the evolution of how they met and how they became the Legion of Doom. But, if you wanted to flash back to the early 80s and you got your nice hot pink collar pops and your mullet is nicely groomed and you got a hot pink comb sticking out of your back pocket, and you walk into Grandma B's in Minnesota and you run into the bouncing staff of what would be Rick Rude, Barry Darso, who of course has many personalities, probably the most popular being Demolition Smash, and then Hawk and Animal as the bouncers in that bar. Now I know, Scum, certainly just like you, like to go out and have a good time, whoop it up a little bit, but I would think twice about doing anything a little too crazy when I'm at a bar and those four guys are the bouncers.
Yeah, I think that predated the Mohawk and the reverse Mohawk thing, but still, I would say a pretty imposing presence at the door would be Animal, Hawk, Rick Rude, and Darso. I would think probably, and I'm sure we'll touch on that here with Animal in a minute as we walk through. We're going to ask him to some of his great memories of his brother, so to speak, Hawk, and also throughout his career and entry into the world of professional wrestling, just like we always do. I would think that we'll probably hear a few good ones from the days from Grandma B, Steve. It's a good point that you bring up. I know I'm interested to hear about that.
Certainly, absolutely. And I guess, folks, we got a huge show in front of us, so enough of us. We're going to take you right to our interview here with Road Warrior Animal. So stay tuned, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. We're going to be on with Road Warrior Animal in just one moment. All right, folks, it's a moment you've all been waiting for, and a moment that I know myself and the Scum have been waiting for. We got Road Warrior Animal, Joe Laurinaitis, with us on the line. We're talking all things Hawk. He's the author of Danger, Death, and the Rush of Wrestling. So glad to have you today. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Always a pleasure to talk to guys that are great wrestling fans.
Awesome. So, this, folks, if you're a longtime listener, this is where we usually jump right in, get our feet wet, get our guests started on where and how they started training for their wrestling career. But given the legendary status of the Road Warriors and the longtime friendship, of course, between yourself and Hawk, we wanted to start out a little bit further back where it all began. So if you could, bring us back to where and how your lives became intertwined. First, I guess it would be out of Chicago, and then how your friendship continued as you both would eventually wind up in Minnesota.
Well, you know, both our parents worked for Honeywell back in Chicago, and then eventually transferred into Minnesota, and that's where, you know, as kids we, you know, I shouldn't say kids, I would say juveniles around junior high age. You know, we were hanging around together, and then you know, we got separated for a little bit, but then when we started working again at Grandma B's, the infamous Grandma B's, where everybody bounced at, from Hawk to Ravishing Rick Rude to Barry Darsow and Smash Demolition, and you know, Nord the Berserker and a bunch of other guys. You know, Hawk and I just started training together and working out together, and you know, we were buddies. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Any particular stories from growing up, that something that Hawk may have done or you guys did together may have got you in a little bit of trouble, or anything that stands out as something that you remember from growing up with Hawk?
Bro, there's so many stories. All that we know is that how we got our nicknames. Hawk always got his nickname because, you know, I played the traditional sports like football and everything else, and then Hawk got his nickname as Hawk because during the football games as I was playing, Hawk was underneath the bleachers beating up people. So, you know, we may have lost the football game while Hawk was probably 5-0 underneath the bleachers. You know, so that's how he got his name, and I just got his name the Animal because everything I touched, I either broke, or in high school, I broke every high school record for lifting there was for my weight class. So that's why people started calling me the Animal. So it's kind of a little insight to things a lot of people don't know.
That's great. I don't think I had ever heard, and I don't know, Scum, if you had the origin of Hawk and Animal. That's some pretty good stuff. Now, you had mentioned working at Grandma B's, and we had a question actually focused on Grandma B's, where you worked as a bouncer along with, like you mentioned, several other future stars in the wrestling world. One can only imagine if someone was silly enough to get out of line with that type of a crew that was keeping order there. So if you could, once again, you know, bring us back to those Grandma B days and tell our listeners, you know, you had mentioned Barry Darsow, Nord the Barbarian, who is a personal favorite of mine. I love that guy. He's absolute maniac in the ring. But, you know, any other stories that come to mind?
You know, when we worked there, back at the time, you know, I was the youngest guy of everybody. I had just turned 19, and they let me bounce there. And, you know, everybody else was 21, 22, 23 years old. That's when Hulk Hogan was working for the AWA. And Hulk Hogan used to come into Grandma B's and play bass guitar with this band called Fragile. And that, you know, we had first saw Hogan when he came into our gym that he trained at, and then we saw him bouncing there. And then after Hogan had just left the AWA after, you know, his great matches with Dick Bockwinkel and all that kind of stuff, Ed Sharkey, who trained Jesse the Body Ventura, was a bartender at Grandma B's. And Ed said, "Hey guys, I'm thinking about trying a wrestling camp." But you got to understand, Grandma B's is one of these places. It wasn't your friendly neighborhood bar. I mean, there were bikers that come in with colors on, and we had to be stand at the door and say, "Listen, you can't wear your colors when you come into the bar. You know, take your jackets off." And if they didn't want to take their jackets off, we helped them take their jackets off, and you know, so there were no colors in a gentle way. You know, there were no colors. You had to have been a real idiot to mess up at that bar, even though there was probably, on any given night, 2,500 to 5,000 people in the bar. You had, like I said, myself and Hawk and Ravishing Rick Rude and Nord the Barbarian and Scott Norton, who was with the Scott Flash Norton with the NWO for a little while, and you know, guys like that all working, you know, along with Barry Darsow, all working at the same time at the same bar. It was kind of crazy. And we were all friends. We all went to the same local high schools together, so we all didn't live that far from each other.
I can only imagine being just like an average guy walking through that bar. I'm certainly not starting any trouble with anybody.
Yeah, you know, Ravishing Rick Rude was probably 235, and he was the smallest guy. You know, so I mean, you know, and he would, you know, Rude was a shredded with abs, and you know, Rude was a strong guy in his own right. You know, so.
Wow, man. So and again, now, like we're talking future Hall of Famers coming out of that bar. You know, yourself and Hawk, and you know, of course Rick Rude, I think, you know, deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame, and of course Demolition as well. So a lot of guys there that certainly made their mark in the professional wrestling world. But before they got into that, you know, icon status, you had to train. You had to, you had to learn the ropes, so to speak. And there was a guy that you mentioned already, Eddie Sharkey, saw you guys at Grandma B's. saw you had some potential. Take us through the story of how you wind up first deciding to give wrestling a whirl with Eddie Sharkey, and recall for us what it was like preparing for a career in wrestling alongside your friends, and the difference it was, like you mentioned before, with powerlifting and athletics. Tell us a little bit about the difference between, playing traditional sports and training with Eddie Sharkey for a career in wrestling.
Well, the traditional sports is just total discipline. And believe it or not, there is a synergy between traditional sports and wrestling. If you don't have the discipline to do it, you're never going to achieve it, because it is a grind. And when we first started out, we learned how to wrestle in the basement of a church in South Minneapolis on an old boxing ring that had 2 corners of it were butted up to walls. So whenever you hit the ropes, your elbows would hit the walls, and that's where we got all got bone chips in our elbows from hitting the walls. It was the most brutal training you could ever go through. We would just bloody each other's mouths and nose, and you got to understand, at the time, I was already benching 550 pounds when I was a 21-year-old kid, going through camp, and and Barry Darsow was a world caliber powerlifter, smash demolition. He was a 765-pound deadlifter. So I mean, we had some strong guys. Scott Norton did a 685 bench. He was a world arm wrestling champion. I mean, so we had some, and Rick Ruiz was an arm wrestling champ. So we had some guys who did other things besides just wrestle. Like you said, we were all mainstream sports trainers, and we trained that way, which I think helped us for the wrestling deal. You know what I mean? I mean, myself when I was younger, I used to dive and stuff, so it was easy for me when we got into throwing drop kicks or doing backflips in the ring or something like that, because I did them when I was younger. Like I said, and when I used to die when I was younger. So I mean, the synergies are the same. If you got to train hard to be in the gym, you got to train hard to be in the world of pro wrestling. That's for sure.
Sure. Well, man, the heck of a crew you guys had, from Grandma B's to the training facility down in the basement there. Going to move along and get into your wrestling career now. Seems like it's become kind of a theme here with us. We've talked recently to some other guys who have been to the next step I'm going to touch on. We talked recently to Larry Zbyszko, Jake the Snake Roberts, Ted DiBiase. So one of my favorite territories of all time, where you guys first kind of went national, was Georgia Championship Wrestling. You started the dominant run that you guys had, would go on for years after that. When you were first brought in there, though, it was just as the Road Warrior by yourself, briefly. So we were wondering who came up with the idea for the leather and the Road Warrior biker gimmick for you before Hawk got it there.
Ole Anderson had just brought me in there, and was going to call me the Road Warrior. He came in one day at Grandma B's because he was a good friend of Ed Sharkey's. And Ole was, people all know this, he was from Ramsey, Minnesota. So he was a Minnesota guy anyway. So he had family there. He would always come back to visit. And one time he came back to visit, and Eddie talked to him to come into the bar. And the first person he saw when he walked into the bar was me. And then he saw Rude. So he brought Rude and I actually down there together, and called me the Road Warrior. And that was back at the time when Jim Barnett and all those, those guys were having this big war on who's going to take over, Georgia Championship Wrestling and this and that. And so that's when Ole Anderson sent me to Charlotte. And then sent me to Jim Crockett Promotions. I'll tell you what, man, if any young wrestlers are out there think that this wrestling game is easy, let me tell you how it was my first little run in Jim Crockett Promotions when I was back in the NWA in Charlotte. I lived one time probably for a week on a bag of pretzel sticks and a half a gallon of milk, and only made about $150 working 9 times a week. So it wasn't like Hawk and I didn't pay our dues, because at the time Hawk went up with Rick Rude and tried to work for Al Tom Club in Vancouver. Then Hawk came back down, and then, of course, eventually I went to Jimmy Crockett. I said, Jimmy, I cannot survive with this. He always sent me to the NWA to learn how to work and learn how to wrestle. And I got to ring with some great guys. I mean, I got to wrestle Ricky Steamboat. I got to wrestle Ric Flair. I got to wrestle Jack Briscoe. I mean, you can't ask for anybody, teachers at the time. Jack Briscoe was world champ. And I remember he let me slam him on TV. I mean, so those guys saw something in me that I didn't even see, that I didn't even know existed. So they said, man, this kid may be, part of the future of pro wrestling. So it was a learning experience. I'll tell you what, I wouldn't want to do it again, but it was a learning experience.
Sure. Well, you had to be doing something right if you're impressing Flair, Steamboat, and Briscoe. If they see something in you,
Yeah, and then getting back to your earlier statement about coming, you were talking about Zbyszko and Jake Roberts and DiBiase. Well, then, when I left and then Hawk quit up in Canada, we pretty much said, forget this wrestling business, man, it sucks. Pretty much what we said. And then I got a call from Ole Anderson again. And at the time, when I first got on the phone with Ole, I said, first thing I said to him, I said, Ole, I said, I really want to beat the heck out of you right now. I said, I don't even want to talk to you. I said, you send me to Charlotte, I starved, lost 20, I was 50 pounds of weight. I went from like 280 to 225. I said, I don't even want to talk to you right now. I said, I lost all this muscle that built training over the years and everything else. And he apologized. He said, listen, I'm going to bring you and Mike in, call you guys the Road Warriors. I said, all right, well, we'll give it one more shot. And when we walked in, you got to imagine walking into the locker room for Hawk and I. There's Paul Orndorff. There's Tommy Rich. There's Dusty Rhodes. There's Tito Santana. There's Sergeant Slaughter. I mean, to us, we're going, holy crap, man, these guys that we see all the time, Ted DiBiase, Jake Roberts wasn't exactly there yet, but Larry Zbyszko was there. And, to us, that was crazy. And that's when we first got there. He says, I told you I was going to bring you in as Road Warriors. He goes, here you go. Here's your tag team titles. And we said, what? We said, yeah, and that's how we got to be tag champs right away.
Wow, that's incredible. What a lineup that was there. I could see
man. It couldn't mean, that little studio there were such great superstars there at the time. They all went on to be superstars of the WWF at the time, then on with WWE as well, I mean, it was pretty crazy. But what great guys. I mean, I spent the first probably 6 months of my career wrestling with Tommy Rich and guys like Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner. That guys in this business don't get enough credit that really taught Hawk and I, a lot of stuff with the wrestling business. And then the best teacher we had of all, of course, was Paul Ellering.
Sure. And Paul was spoke with us not that long ago, and he was fantastic. He said the same about working with you guys, actually, all for one and one for all, I believe is how he put it. But,
yeah, that's it. We were like the Three Musketeers, man. And but Paul used to take the time out of his day and draw, the ring on a napkin and show us, say, okay, Animal, you're here, and Hawk, you're here. He more or less talked to me more because I was kind of more like the ring general out there. I kind of, Hawk was the off the wall kind of, and there was no secret that Hawk was the partier guy, and so he always looked over to me like, where are we at in the match? Where am I supposed to be? What's going on? And I would just kind of. I would know what everybody had to do in the ring, and that was by the help of Paul. Man, Paul was terrific at that.
Sure. Well, again, when you talked about when you and Hawk came back in there to Georgia. Again, when you guys first came in, it was still with the leather and the biker kind of Road Warrior gimmick. Whose idea was it to bring about the spikes and the paint and the haircuts and stuff?
Well, we sat in the hotel room in. I think it was Capeville, Georgia, right outside the airport there in Atlanta. And we were sitting there with Bill Watts and Ole Anderson. And Ole had the Road Warrior gimmick, but at the time, Bill Watts had just gave Dewey, the missing link, the paint up, down in where his territory was down there. Was UWF? Was that what was it? I think it was. Down there in Louisiana. And then all of a sudden, they said, well, we want you guys to put a couple lines in your face, kind of like the Mohawk guy in the movie The Road Warrior that was the heel guy, that was always trying to kill Mad Max, you know what I mean? Kind of like that kind of guy. So, and then Hawk came up with a brilliant idea. He goes, well, hey, why doesn't Adam will get a Mohawk, I'll do a reverse Mohawk so we can look like we can plug our heads into each other. And I, looked at him at a time when he said that, and I said, man, are you freaking nuts? But we ended up doing it, and that it worked. I mean, it was one of those things that we tried, it worked, and I mean, we were like the anti-villain, you know what I mean? And then later on, I did the spikes in my garage. I knew guys that played in the NFL, and I knew a guy that run power equipment, Rydell power equipment, and got spikes and shoulder pads, and then had a buddy at Honeywell making some spikes, and did it in my garage. And next thing you know, we had a spike shoulder pads.
Very good, very good. So going to send it back over to Steve here in a second, but first, while we were still there and still on the topic, you touched briefly on Paul Ellering, writing out the game plans and things like that. How at first were you guys paired with Paul? How did that come about that he wound up being your manager? I mean, he was synonymous with you guys for the remainder of your career, so how did you guys first get paired together in wrestling?
Well, I think it was pretty much to help us out because, I mean, we've never done any interviews before. We never talked on the mics. And all he says, listen, you idiots go on the camera, just be big and mean. He goes, let this guy do the talking. And then that's exactly what we did. And then we started easing ourselves into it a little bit. Paul would give a suggestion, and we'll say something about this. I'll say something about this. Then after a while, nobody needed to tell us what to say. And we just started running with it. But that's initially why they put Paul with us, because A, he was great. B, he had 2 major knee surgeries on his patella tendon, and he just figured his wrestling career was done, so then they put him with us because he knew the wrestling business and he could teach us the wrestling business, and besides that, we learned a lot from him, and then all 3 of us together in interviews, it looked real, and that was, in that time of the business, that's what it was all about.
Certainly. This is some fantastic stuff. Thanks again. We got Road Warrior Animal with us talking all things Hawk, all things Legion of Doom today on WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. We're going to move along here. Now, JR, Jim Ross, had always kind of coined the term for you guys, the American Originals. You came in, and unlike anyone that I could remember I was about a 10-year-old kid when I first saw you guys come onto the television set in that studio, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and you guys would just come out, and before the fans could even react, I can still hear that ring and the huge bumps your opponents were taking. So were there any of the veterans or the old-timers that took issue at that point? Now, I know you mentioned a couple of the guys' names earlier that were there, and certainly just an intimidating factor in the locker room. But were there any other guys that just simply had an issue or had a beef with you guys just for bursting out on the scene and getting pushed to the top and dominating like you did? Were there any specific instances or performers that you could recall for us that, were possibly an instance that, either brought up or you had to deal with regarding, some of the older talent having some issues with your early success?
No. We really, to be honest with you, most of the older guys took us under their wings, because we were willing to learn. It wasn't like we came in and we were rude to everybody when we came in and did it. I mean, we were businessmen and we were pros about it. We were given an opportunity that the business called for at the time. It called for something drastic, man, because the wrestling business was at an all-time low. Nobody was going to events. Nobody was going anywhere. I mean, fans were going a little bit up in WWF, but they weren't even going to a lot of events there unless it was, snooker flying off the top of the cage. So they needed a shake-up in the wrestling business. So most of the old-timers worked real well with Hawk and I. There was one instance when we were in the AWA. I forget the guy's name. Oh, man. We were wrestling with somebody, and they brought some guys in from Memphis to do TV, and there was one older worker that came in there. He was one of the top dogs down there for Jarrett at one time, and I don't know what happened. Hawk tried doing a couple things with him. He wouldn't do something with Hawk, and then it was a race to the back room where we ended up, and Hawk ended up knocking him out in the back room. But it was one of those things. We were at the Showboat in Las Vegas, Nevada, and doing TVs for the AWA, and we had just got in there, and this guy wouldn't do anything what Hawk wanted him to do. Hawk would try to give him the headlock, and the guy would blind Hawk and put Hawk in the headlock, and we got back to the locker room, and I said, hey, we're supposed to go out there, and you guys are supposed to help us get over, not you get over, and then the guy mouthed off to Hawk, and next thing you know, bam.
Man, oh man. And again, now, look, coming from a time where, there are a lot of just tough individuals that were in the ring. Well, a lot, today we see a lot more trained performers, but I think you could probably agree even more so that there were just some tough cookies back in the locker room in those days. So to have you guys walk in and, lay somebody out for not cooperating, I bet you that turned a few heads. Now, you were talking about, leaving the NWA and heading to the AWA, American Wrestling Association, up in Minnesota, where, you get your first of many runs as World Tag Team Champions. You guys have held the belts everywhere. Bring us through what was the thought process behind your jump at the time from Georgia, and who were some of yours and Hawk's favorite guys to work with there, and were there any that, other than that guy you were telling about, any other guys that didn't really, you didn't get along with in the ring?
Well, I mean, we got along pretty much with everybody. We wrestled the fabulous ones, Curran and Lane, and we wrestled the Long Riders, which were great. We wrestled Jerry Blackwell and Sergeant Slaughter, which was fun, for us at the time. And let me see who else. I'm trying to think if we had anybody that had any animosity. I guess at the time Greg Donnie had a little bit of an attitude with us because he was the booker and his dad owned the company. But we took care of that real quick. We wrestled Greg and Jim in Winnipeg, and I think Hawk fresh slammed Greg and threw him in about the third row. Out of the ring in about the third row, and that took care of that. Then there was respect right after that. But we really didn't have to go in there and bully anybody. Think back at that time in the wrestling business, man. If the promoter treated you like crap, you went and took care of it. There was no middleman. Even with Vince McMahon, I even cornered Vince one time and said, "Hey, I feel like you're backing us in a corner. You're really starting to piss me off." Guys like Kevin Kelly Nails choking out promoters like Vince. Back then, you took care of business. If you were getting hosed or you weren't getting paid, the same as you were the guy you were in the ring with, you took care of it. That's just the way it was. But back in the AWA, it wasn't that bad. We our biggest probably nemesis was here. It was hard back in the AWA because now by this time people are starting to like us, and now they know that we're going to the AWA back to kind of where our home was, our second home in Minnesota. So when we get there and we wrestle, everybody kind of already knows we were from Minnesota, got trained in Minnesota, and then now we're kind of like bad good guys. We're like the bullies of the bullies, good guys. And it made it hard working with guys like Larry Henning and Kurt Henning, who were your typical white meat baby faces. Because now here we go, we're the black and blue baby faces, and so it was a learning curve on everybody's. It was a changing time in the wrestling business. The wrestling business was changing. You could see it before your eyes changing. That's very, very interesting. And now, we're at the point, and this happened when Paul Ellering was on the show, and it's happened with several other guests on the show. And we're at the point now where you're in AWA, and you mentioned the fabulous ones. Now, you hear stories and the legend of certain tales, and they get blown out of proportion, and then the internet wrestling community gets their hands on them and blows them completely out of proportion. On WGD Weekly, we try to have get these answers from the performers or from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So given that you were there and were part of whatever happened, take us through the story about the night where yourself and Hawk decided that you were not going to drop the tag titles to the fabulous ones. Give us the reaction of course, Vern Gagne, Steve Kern, and Stan Lane. When and if you guys decided you didn't want to follow what was being booked in the back, so to speak. So tell us the story on why Hawk and Animal refused to drop the titles to the fabulous ones. Well, you guys know our gimmick. We're street fighters. And if you're street fighters the way Hawk and I supposedly portrayed ourselves as street fighters, you're not going to fall for it. They wanted to do, I'm sure Paul told you this, they wanted to do a finish called the switcheroo because they kind of both looked alike. They wanted to do something where it went into a four-way. You knock one of them down and out, the other one goes outside the ring, pulls the knocked out one out of the ring, and then lays there and fakes it, and is going to roll something to beat us. I kept looking to Paul, and I kept saying, man, that ain't right. And we're in the locker room. I said, it's not right. It just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. And then, it was Paul's suggestion. He goes, well, I'll tell you what. I know Steve Kern very well. If you go out there and you start hitting Kern with chairs and start throwing them around, he's going to get pissed off because he's not going to back down. He's going to get pissed off and come flying in with chairs, and the match will get DQ'd. So they give us the finish in the locker room. We say, okay, we're going to do it. We go to the ring. Now, we know we're not doing the finish the whole time. We get in the ring. First thing Hawk says to Kern and Lane, he goes, we ain't doing the finish. He goes, listen to us and nobody will get hurt.
Right.
Curtis Lane and Ellering just going, oh my God, I just can't believe you said that. And I kind of said, I can't believe you just said that, because, you know, in the wrestling business, you're only as good as the guy you're in the ring with, and if you don't work good with the guy you're in the ring with, you make no money. So the bell rung. We press line both of them, toss them outside, start whacking them with chairs, and next thing you know, here comes Kern back in with chairs, and boom, 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 DQ'd it. We didn't drop the belts. Came back to the locker room, and Greg Gunn is yelling, oh my gosh, nobody's changed finishes on my dad. Why do you guys change the finish? And Vern comes yelling in the locker room, geez, nobody's changed finishes on me in 25 years. You know what the heck's going on? I said, well, Vern, I said, first time for everything. I said, we just did. And that was pretty much it. Right after, that was pretty much it. That's pretty much the way it went, and it was that simple. But yeah, Ellering, I don't want to say he orchestrated it, but he knew Kern real well, and he knew what to do to, get these guys going. And that's, I'm sure if you thought to Paul, it's probably pretty much the same story as what Paul said. That's pretty much the way it happened.
Sure. Well, we appreciate you touching on that. And touching on that was one of your first world title runs there in AWA. Maybe more so than any American team ever, the Road Warriors were definitely a global entity. So this would be true, especially in your time spent in Japan. Talk to us a little bit about the great success and popularity that you guys had over in Japan over the years, and relive some of your fond stories or memories working in the various promotions while you were over there.
Well, our first trip over there was for All Japan Pro Wrestling, and actually it's just kind of funny because Vern helped us get our first deal. But once we got over there, we said we'll do our deals from now on by ourselves. We don't need any help with the promoter. And the Japanese didn't mind because, back then the promoter got a cut of the guy's pay, and they would rather just pay the guys instead of giving the promoter the cut. But All Japan was great. They came and they followed the Japanese magazines like Tokyo Sports and Gong magazine and all the top wrestling magazines followed us for probably the first 2 years and followed us everywhere. Took photos, did, filmed Hawk eating 16 raw eggs in a shell one time and make pretend we're eating raw chicken out of the garbage cans and everything else. And, would film us. So by the time we got there, we were already an icon in Japan. As soon as Iron Man played, people would scatter like ants, just scatter and run away from the entrance to get away from us. They wanted to see us, but then again, they didn't want any part of us because we ran, you guys know us, we always ran in the ring. And with the spike collars and the spike fist, things we had on, nobody wanted to get in our way. And so that's, Japan was always real good to us. We had some great matches with Ricky Choshu and Jumbo Tsuruta, who's now passed away. Great match with Choshu and Yatsu. We wrestled Giant Baba and Yatsu, Baba and Wojima, who was a great sumo wrestler, was a world champion, and we helped train in Charlotte. That we wrestled with Giant Baba and Wojima. Wrestled with great guys. They did great Muto and everything else. And there's so many great guys like Kabuki and everything else that it's really hard to. It's hard. The Japanese guys, we love that style. The Japanese style was stiff and hard, and we loved it. We said, if you're going to hit me so I feel it. I don't want to take no kick. I remember taking kicks from Hashimoto, and Hashimoto tried to break your ribs. But I said, it's cool, great. You're not going to break my ribs, bro. I'm benching 600 pounds at the time. I'll take all your kicks in the chest. You want to give me. So yeah, it was fun. Hawk was a blast. I remember one time wrestling against Jumbo Tsuruta. And see, Jumbo always wrestled fine with me. I don't know if the guys were more afraid of me than they were Hawk at the time, because I was just the kind of guy that was I don't mess around type of guy. And I remember everything I did with Jumbo, he would do fine, everything he preferred, but he would always screw up his high spots and this stuff in the match with Hawk. And finally one day, Hawk came back from the locker room, kicked the door open, and told me, he goes, listen here, MNFer, he goes, one more time, he goes, we're going to go. He goes, I'm going to knock your chap butt out, and made his point across. And after that, everything was fine. Everything was cool.
Well, again, that'll set you straight in a hurry, I would imagine, when
Well,
Hawks come back and land.
You got to imagine we're in a locker room with some great guys too. We're in a locker room with Hanson and Brody and a lot of guys that we respected a lot too. So we had a lot to stick up for ourselves too, and in different country. We're in Japan, and of course Ellering is there too, and says, hey, you have to take it over here, man. You got to take what you want. So we did. I mean, we literally take what we wanted over there.
Sure.
And we were so much bigger. We were so much bigger and stronger than everybody. It didn't matter. I mean, I remember Presley and Killer Khan and did them for like 3 or 5 reps over my head, and Khan was over 320 pounds.
Wow, that is impressive. Very good. We'll keep moving along here chronologically. Next, you head back where you said you had began and weren't too fond of. You guys went to Jim Crockett Promotions. Probably the company's biggest draw there at that point in time, most recognizable performers. A few things that we're going to touch on, jump right in, some of your legendary feuds, and specifically some pretty interesting gimmick matches, some of the most interesting of all time. To start, let's talk with the feud with the Four Horsemen with you and Hawk and Dusty and Nikita that led to the inaugural War Games. We spoke with Paul on this as well. Lex Luger talked with us a bit about it when he was on the show. So looking back, what was it like working with the Four Horsemen and maybe the most memorable feud of all time? And what are your memories leading up to and performing in those first War Games, Matt?
I'll tell you what. It didn't matter at the time. It was AWA, NWA, WWF. Nowhere in the wrestling business were there more fun matches than when we wrestled the Four Horsemen. When Hawk and I wrestled the Horsemen in tags, when Arn and Tully had the belts, or we wrestled in 6-mans with Dusty, that was the most fun time in the wrestling business. Even when we wrestled in 8-mans and then the War Games against Luger and the guys, it was a fun time. We sold out everywhere we went. We were selling out. At that particular time in the wrestling business, man, it just was unheard of that everywhere you went, it would be sold out before you even got to the arena.
Sure.
So and we learned a lot. I mean, there were some great teachers. Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Ric Flair were freaking 3 great teachers to learn from when we were wrestling against the Horsemen, and Hawk and I learned a lot.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, Paul said pretty much the same about those War Games. Lex Luger, I believe, said it was the most electric he's ever felt anywhere that he wrestled when those War Games matches. So,
man, I'm telling you, it was one thing when you had. I mean, you got to understand. After we went through against with the Horsemen, Actually, I think it was maybe even before the Horsemen when Hawk and I went in there, and in the Charlotte Coliseum outdoors, and we wrestled Ivan and Nikita Koloff. I think it was one of the Great American Bashes. Mm-hmm. That turned us stone cold babyface because people really didn't know how to take it along. We were coming in NWA, and we were just demolishing guys on TV. Then it was the end of the Cold War, and then they put us against Ivan and Nikita. Next thing you know, people are chanting USA, and that's where Jim Ross labeled us, great American icons like that. Because I mean, when they started chanting USA for guys like Hawk and I, because we were your typical Americans. Hey, man, you kick us down, but we ain't gonna take no crap from anybody. And then we come back, and then we just totally, did the Russian chain matches and everything else with Ivan and Nikita. That set the stage for us with the Horsemen. That turned us stone cold babyface, and then there was no turning back. And that's when it really started. Next thing you know, I mean, that's why I think Crockett's knew that they had something really big, because once they put us against Ivan and Nikita, they said, "Oh, holy crap! This is money in the bank here,"
Sure, absolutely.
And it was almost for years, man. For years, all through the late '80s, it just sold out like crazy everywhere.
Yeah, it was almost like the people were waiting to full-on cheer you. They maybe weren't supposed to.
They wanted to at the time, but they didn't know if they could or was right. But then once we turned good guy, and then we never changed our interviews or anything else, and that's what set the tone for guys like the Horsemen, because you had guys like those guys that wouldn't back down for anybody. You had guys like Luger who looked phenomenal, and and stuff like that. And then they really, their gimmick was believable, but it's still, even in the War Games, you could play Dusty's music, you play Nikita's music, but as soon as they played Iron Man, the place erupted, and it was electrifying, just like Les said, man. It was, I don't think I've ever been anywhere in the wrestling business where it's been like that yet till today.
Sure. Well, again, moving along while you were there in Crockett Promotions, another feud that you guys went into that I wanted to ask a couple of two-part question here on was you guys faced off with the Powers of Pain, Warlord and the Barbarian. They did the angle with the bench press contest where you had the goalie mask when you got injured there afterwards. And just wanted to ask first a couple of things. One is kind of back to what Steve was asking as far as the Fabulous One match, a little bit of lore. But first off, I wanted to know, what was your guys' take on the guys who, I mean, their look obviously was taken directly from you. I mean, what were your and Hawk's thought on, you know, a team that pretty much exactly copied your look, your style in the ring? And second, at the end, it seemed like at the end, the payoff of that feud was supposed to be a series of scaffold matches, but then the Powers of Pain suddenly were gone. I mean, I've read things on it that they, you know, here or there, but just to ask you to maybe clear the air on how come those series of matches never took place.
Well, first of all, I mean, even though we had a lot of copiers, a lot of imitators, nobody could really do what Hawk and I was doing. I mean, there was always differences. You know what I mean? You could be two big guys in the ring that were muscular, but you know, Hawk and I could run. We actually could run pretty quick, and we showed we were athletes and everything else. And Warlord, Terry Stritsky, was a good friend of mine. I helped train him. I went over to his house in his front yard. His dad bought him a ring, and I helped him learn how to kick and throw and do certain punches and everything else. So I had no animosity at all with Barbarian. Barbarian's a great guy, good friend of mine. We all worked out together. So there was never any animosity with me ever. See, a lot of guys got bothered by copycatters, but Hawk and I were so secure and comfortable who we are with the Road Warriors that, you know, imitation was the greatest form of flattery. And, yeah, that whole gimmick, what a lot of people don't realize in that bench press contest is that the night before in Hammond, Indiana, Warlord went to do a Samoan slam with me and landed on my head, and that's when he popped out my left eye, and it went out, and it popped when it went back in too far. He totally shattered. In one move, I had a skull fractured cheekbone, broken nose, and my orbital rim was shattered. And the next night, I had that pay-per-view in Greensboro to do the bench press contest. And my eye was shattered, and I still ended up doing ridiculous 545 or whatever it was. Then we said, okay, throw it up to 600. But, yeah, I benched, I did over 500 pounds with my orbital rim socket blown out, and my nose broke, my cheek broke, and everything else. People didn't know it because I painted off the swelling. I painted over top of it.
Sure.
Well, that's when I took the time off and came back in Baltimore with the mask. And I was supposed to stay out 6 months. I only stayed out 2 months. I came back, work early, and recontinued the gimmick. And we were supposed to do scaffold matches. And Warlord and Barbarian came to me and said, "Listen, Joe, actually, we're really kind of afraid to go up on those scaffolds." And I said, listen, I really don't want to go up there with you two big guys anyway. I mean, we all at the time, Hawk was the lightest guy, and he was 270. I mean, Warlord and Barbarian and I were well over 300 pounds, and on that 3-foot wide scaffold up there, I didn't trust it. And Warlord came to talk to me and said, "Hey, Joe, we're thinking about going to the WWF." I said, "Terry, my recommendation to you is go." I said, because you know what? You guys are going to fall off the scaffold. I ain't falling off that scaffold. I told him, I was honest with him. I told him, I said, and you're too big to jump off that scaffold.
Well, that does clear the air. I mean, again, I've read different stories about they didn't want to do this, but in the end, they came to you as a friend.
No, they came here as a friend and respected me in the business. Hey, man, I'm just giving you my opinion. What do you think? I said, bro, I respect you guys. You guys, if you're leaving, you're leaving. Go to the WWF and tear it up, man. Good luck. I hope you do. I said, we'll see you there someday. You know, I mean, that's what the plan was, you know. And I said, so, I mean, that's just the way it was. And there's no way I was going to go up to scaffold. And I told Terry, I told Barb, I said, I'd go to WWF tomorrow if I were you. And they actually kind of did go the next day.
Man, very good.
Crazy. I hear the "This is awesome" chant in my head going on in the background. You've been a great guest here. We got a couple more questions with Road Warrior Animal on WGD Weekly. I wanted to hop in here and ask you a quick question regarding what the Scum was asking you about. Of course, the Warlord and the Barbarian, essentially using your gimmick. And I know you had mentioned, imitation is a serious form of flattery. Clear the air for us on another team that, and myself and the Scum, we do a little bit of work on the internet for some sites that are, specifically based off the glory days of wrestling. Now, you have had nothing but good to say about Barry Darsow, a super strong guy, Demolition Smash. Now, one of my favorite guys of all time, and when we always try to get him in on the show, is Bill Eadie, Demolition Axe, Action Smash, the Demolition tag team. Everybody has, pretty much negative things to say from what I've seen on the internet when they have to compare the Road Warriors to Demolition. So give us your thoughts on what all about the gimmick there and what you thought of Bill Eadie and Barry Darsow using a gimmick so similar again to the Road Warriors.
Well, I mean, probably like when you guys were younger watching too, and so you had the same reaction back when you were a young kid. And wrestling fans, so the hardcore ones, take this so serious. And they're so protective of the guys or the wrestlers they love that's why you'll see the negative online or else. Hawk and I had no animosity towards Demolition ever. Barry Darsow is one of my best friends still to this day. He and I've known Barry since I was 19 years old. It's over 30 years ago. I mean, Barry is a great guy. Bill Eadie, I wrestled him when he was a masked superstar. So I've known Bill a long time, so is Hawk. We have nothing but respect for those guys. If you look at it with down the nuts and bolts of it, those guys were two wrestlers portraying tough guys. Hawk and I were two tough guys portraying wrestlers. Total opposite gimmicks, really. Yeah, they were similar with I just give Barry a hard time. I said, yeah, but I said, we had real spikes, man. I said, you guys had that rhinestone stud setter set that you made those with. Barry, if you talk to Barry, he'd say, you dog, And we still to this day, we call each other, back when we were younger, we used to all call each other Billy. So when I call Barry, he'll go, Billy, what are you doing? How are you? I say, hey, man, what's up, Bill? What's going on? What are you doing? I said, how's the family? How's the kids? How's it feel being a grandpa? I mean, listen, man, there was never ever any animosity. I hope those guys, I was wishing they would make millions of dollars with that gimmick, And unfortunately, at the time that we got brought into the WWF at the time against Demolition, that should have went on for 2 to 3 years. And Vince finally got us in there, and he just wanted to smash Demolition up. No pun intended, but he just wanted to kill him right away, and that's why we wrestled Demolition, that we beat him so quick. We beat him with the Ultimate Warrior, then we beat him right away, and, it was sad, but we should have worked a long angle with him, because that's what, like you say, the wrestling fans, that's why there's still so much negative online, is because there really was never an answer given to any of the fans. It just got abruptly, we just beat them abruptly, bam, 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 boom, real quick on TV one day. And that was it.
That's incredible. That's a very interesting, and I personally, and I'm sure the Scum does too, a two-year plus program with the Road Warriors versus Demolition would have been something extremely special. In a time, again, now, with tag team wrestling being so prominent, at that time, you guys were at the apex of it. That would have been a great feud.
Well, just think what you could have done at the time with that. You not only had us and Demolition, you had the Rougeaus, you had the British Bulldogs, you had all these teams you could have involved in everything, and then instead he just kept killing them off one by one, and then after a while, the only ones left standing were Hawk and I from the original tag team era, you know what I mean?
Man, that's incredible stuff. And now I got to apologize here for taking us off track a little bit. Now, we were talking about scaffold matches, and again, we have to get to another, unforgettable moment regarding Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors, against another one of our guests, Jim Cornette. He didn't have the opportunity. We have a two-parter coming up with him. He didn't have the opportunity to really get into that story he tells about yourself and Hawk against the Midnight Express in a series of scaffold matches. And, of course, the most remembered one would be that huge fall that he took off that structure. Now, that match, people rate these matches 3, 4, 5 stars. I think it is a 5-star match for historical, something historical in the world of pro wrestling. As far as the action went, it was a little shaky at best to watch that match. So relive that match for us if you could, leading in the reaction of Cornette when he was asked to come off the scaffold, and your thought watching this whole thing unfold. You got a front row seat for this way up high as he plummeted 20, 30 feet down and pretty much blew out both of his legs. So tell us a little bit about that night.
Well, unfortunately, the main match that people see, the scaffold matches, is that one that got filmed and is the one they see. After a while, because we did like 100 of those darn things, after about the first 20 of them, it was done on recording, but heck, I was throwing drop kicks up on that scaffolding, believe it or not.
Man.
Yeah, so I mean, but yeah, the first one was shaky. All 4 of us were scared to death to be up there. I mean, that thing sucked because it didn't get put up by our crew. It got put up by the Union crew, because that was a Union arena there in the Omni in Atlanta, so the Union had to put it up. So it wasn't put up by Jim Crockett Promotions. The Omni put it up, and some of the wiring wasn't as tight as it should be and everything else. But let me tell you something. Being 30 foot up high above that ring was brutally, it sucked more than you guys can ever imagine. I'm just telling you that right now. But we chased Cornette up there, and it was the funniest thing, because at the bottom, there's Big Bubba, and Bubba's supposed to catch him. And I said to him, I said, man, even if you do catch him, you are going to blow your back out catching him. I said, you guys are nuts for doing this. And I chased him up there, and, as Jimmy's holding on to the bottom, I was laying there on top of the scaffold like I was chasing him down. And I said, Bubba, I said, are you ready? He goes, yeah, I'm ready. And he had those stupid glasses on, and he misjudged Cornette's fall, and Cornette fell like a ton of bricks. I never laughed so hard in my life to see a human bounce that high. I tell you, we should have laughed, but we all were laughing our butts off when that happened. Believe me, I have all the respect in the world for Jim Cornette, but when he did that, man, I just lost it laughing. But I'll tell you what, though, man, one of the greatest managers ever in professional wrestling, I'll tell you that.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Great guy. And he was a very gracious guest, funny guy. And I know that story is told, and you can, if you're listening to the show, you guys can look that up on YouTube, a very animated description of what was going on by Jim Cornette. But, we were talking a little bit about Demolition and the Road Warriors, a little bit of a name change turning into the Legion of Doom, moving on, like you mentioned, to the World Wrestling Federation, already a household name. Your brand rose, to become a multiple-time tag team champion there, maybe the most popular duo in the organization's history. And there's a myriad of names that come out in teams or in groups now, even now, up to this day. But still, I think the Legion of Doom or the Road Warriors kind of stand still at the top of the mountain. But take us through the process of leaving Crockett Promotions and the move up to New York, working for Vince McMahon. Talk to us about how that came about, and so your earliest interaction with Vince McMahon, and maybe a couple of stories about yourself and Hawk on the road working for WWF.
Well, at the time, Vince had the Ultimate Warrior, and he came to us. He says, "Well, at first he tried to tell us, well, nobody knows who you are up here." And I said, "Vince, come on. We've been on WTBS for 2 years. They knew who we are. I guarantee they knew who we are." And he goes, "Well, we'll see." And that's when we had that match against the Hart Foundation that only made it to Coliseum Video. He goes, "I want to see what kind of reaction you guys get." And, well, of course, we got a standing ovation going against the Harts, who were your babyface champions at the time. And at the time, he says, "Well, I got to change your name. I can't call you the Road Warriors because I got the Ultimate Warrior." He goes, "Can we come up with another name?" And Hawk and I are thinking, well, that's kind of dumb that he's acting like this. Is that everybody knows the announcers from the Legion of Doom, Animal and Hawk, the Road Warriors. It says Precious Following presents from the Legion of Doom, because Hawk and I and Ellering were always the Legion of Doom. And we got that actually from a Super Friends cartoon. When the guy went, meanwhile, back at the Legion of Doom. And that's where we got that. We were watching TV one day, and that's when it came out. And so we said, well, how about the Legion of Doom? And that was good. So we owned both names. We owned the Road Warriors, and we owned the Legion of Doom when it pertained to wrestling. So it didn't matter to us. We lent it to the WWF at the time when we used that. So it was no big deal to us. They still announced us the Legion of Doom, Road Warrior Animal, Road Warrior Hawk. You know what I mean? So it didn't matter. And in our interviews, we still called ourselves the Road Warriors. We stuck that in all our promos and stuff. So
very, very cool. Well, what was it like? The difference in maybe the style of booking or how you guys commuted from city to city, working the house shows, working the bigger events. Was there a marked difference between what you dealt with at Crockett or even with Vern Gagne and then moving over to Vince McMahon? What were some of the bigger differences that you noticed? What's something that sticks out as being very unique to working with him?
Well, at the time, there was no rhyme or reason to anything he did. So when we first went there, it was just literal chaos, it seemed to us. People that you think should be wrestling each other were not wrestling each other, and it was just the opposite other way around. But we were one of the first guys back, Acme Toys or whatever, when they made not Power Ranger figures. They were making the He-Man figures. They made Hawk and I figures, that same company. I think it was Mattel. Made Hawk and I action figures. So we were some of the first guys that come out with action figures in the wrestling business. And from one company to the next, it jumped up bigger and bigger. As we went to the NWA, we got into with kangaroo shoes and different things like that, and it got bigger. And then when it got to be the WWF at the time, they were the king at the marketing process. They had that marketing process down. They were marketing stuff all over the place, all over the world, and which fit in right into our gimmick because we were popular all over the world, so that helped us greatly. And they were just starting to do their tours, going over to places like Glasgow, Scotland, and Barcelona, Spain, and Milan, Italy. And Hawk and I were on a lot of those first-time tours, going over to Europe for WWF. So and people were waiting to see us, whether it was Great Britain all over the place. And I want to get a look at the Road Warriors, and who we going to. It didn't matter who we wrestled. And of course, going overseas and you go over to Great Britain, they tagged us up with the British Bulldog. That's what we did 6 mans against Warlord Barbarian, and I forget who else, Hercules. I think it was Herc one time. And so we had some great matches. But yeah, it was. I mean, in the locker room, it didn't matter what company you're in. The boys are the boys, the same. But the traveling schedule with the WWF was definitely extensively harder than anywhere else.
Sure, certainly. Yeah, you go from a regional territory to a worldwide entity, so the travel and especially the overseas stuff, and there's a lot of stories out there of how grueling that is. I know the Scum has a couple of more questions for you. We got Road Warrior Animal with us. We're talking all things Hawk, all things Animal, and all things the Legion of Doom on the 10th anniversary of the passing of Road Warrior Hawk. Scum, I'm going to tag you in, man. I know you got a couple more questions to ask.
Sure. Again, we want to thank Road Warrior Animal for being here with us, remembering the 10-year anniversary of the passing of his longtime partner here. And I, as your partner would say, it's been quite a rush here with you today, Animal. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks. Hawk would enjoy it. Hawk would love to be on the show today, I'll tell you that.
Well, we would love to have them, just like we're enjoying your company here. One last question, and then we have a request for you at the end here. So next up, we wanted to go in 2011, your remembrances of your induction, the Road Warriors, and Paul Ellering to the WWE Hall of Fame. Again, when Paul spoke with us on this, he was pretty emotional in doing so. Is anyone familiar with the speech that you guys both paid great tribute to Hawk? What did that whole experience, being honored by your peers and being inducted, mean to you? How special was it to be able to recognize your brother, your longtime friend in that setting, with the whole wrestling world, past, present, and future, watching on and listening in?
Well, to be honest, of course, like any wrestler would say, I thought it was about time. I mean, I thought it should have happened earlier, much earlier. But you couldn't have picked a better spot to do it than in Atlanta. Otherwise, they could have done it in Chicago at the WrestleMania in Chicago. It was, you know, I mean, what can you say? You go out there and, you know, after all these years, and I retired officially in 2006. I mean, people are chanting LOD, LOD, and then Hawk, 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 Hawk. You know, I mean, what can you say? I mean, it's just, I mean, it pretty much spoke for itself, to be quite honest with you. And then when Ellering brought that Hawk figure out there, I almost lost it. I mean, I said, you got to be kidding. You know, then they did the close-up with it on TV and everything else, and everybody's crying in the audience, you know. But still, it was a great tribute to us. I think, you know, when I went out to dinner the night before, I had people from Ireland everywhere coming up to me. I went to the Hard Rock Cafe down there in Atlanta, and I was getting bombarded by people from all over different countries. And so they knew it was going to be crazy, because at that WrestleMania, a lot of people don't realize they were supposed to play 2 songs for the Hall of Famers. One was for Shawn Michaels, one was for the Legion of Doom. They canceled playing our music because they knew in Atlanta we were going to steal that show. And which we kind of did at the Hall of Fame. I mean, there was a lot of great guys that got inducted to the Hall of Fame that day, you know, from the Armstrong family to Jim Duggan to Abdullah to everybody else, and Shawn Michaels. But they canceled our music, which I thought was kind of, I wasn't really happy when they did that, because if they would have played our music there at that venue, you guys know that place would have come unglued. Nobody would have been able to come out after us if they would have done that, and that's the way it was supposed to be. But it was what it was. But it was a great tribute to our success. To look at the crowd and see a lot of the guys that have been inducted in the Hall of Fame to be inducted was great. I mean, even though our wrestling business is entertainment, it's still to get recognized by your peers, not only for that Hall of Fame, but the other Pro Wrestling Hall of Fames, and they have been inducted to about 3 or 4. But they all are a tribute to what Hawk and I and Paul have done together.
Sure. Well, again, I would agree with you there. That was nice to see you guys honored and remembered in that way. But, yeah, it was probably a little bit overdue for the greatest team of all time to have to wait that long. But, hey, Atlanta was a good spot for it, like you said. And I would agree with you. They probably backed off on the music because they don't call it the Road Warrior pop for nothing.
Yeah, I tell you.
To the day, they still call it that. So I mean,
they still do it today, and it's funny in the wrestling business. It was kind of funny. I mean, you know, Michael Hayes thought he was taking me serious one time when I said, "Hey, man, do you hear the Road Warrior pop?" But it was a kidding thing at the time, you know, because we would just laugh and be amazed because we were bad guys getting that kind of cheer. So that's where it became kind of a teasing thing a little bit. But then again, it was a testament to the work we were doing. You know, the people in the wrestling business, they only cheer for you if they like you and if you're doing your job the right way. I mean, that's the one thing I think that the business has gotten away from. Like you say, it's a different era. You know, the people choose who you like, who they like. And if they don't like you, there's nothing you're going to do to get, you know, to be the top man. I don't care who you are.
Sure.
You know, you cannot insult the integrity of your fans because they are your bread and butter. And I think that's one thing that they've gotten away from a little bit. They shove guys down people's throats so much that, you know, they don't get a chance to have a relationship with the fans.
Sure.
I don't know that makes sense, but, you know.
Yeah, no, it does. We've spoken to the exact same thing on here. Steve brought something to that effect up I think it was just 2 weeks ago on the show that, you know, you just can't, if you push somebody too far down somebody's throat, they're never going to have a chance, just like you just said.
Well, I mean, I'll take one guy, for instance, that's who wasn't ready for the push. A guy like Ryback was not ready for that big push. You throw him on pay-per-view, you end up killing him on every pay-per-view. What does that do for Ryback? Nothing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Guy looks like $1 million. He looks like a Goldberg, you know, talk about something similar to Goldberg. You look just like Bill Goldberg, you know what I mean? To that kind of extent of a build, and then you kill him every pay-per-view. You know what I mean?
Right.
And, God bless John Cena, who's a great champion and been a great world champ, but he's another guy. They shove down people's throat, and a lot of people don't care for it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The people have to choose who they want to look up to. And I think Hawk and I literally come from the streets, wrestling in a lot of these hardcore cities, like Philadelphia, and Chicago, and then New York, and Baltimore, and then Atlanta. We had respect from a lot of people, and then going all over the world and continuing the respect. And it wasn't on the behalf of the Road Warriors. We were continuing the respect on behalf of the USA and professional wrestling. You know what I mean? It went further. It grew bigger than just Hawk and I and Paul.
Sure, absolutely. Would agree with you 100% there.
I mean, Paul Ellering probably expressed that the best. It was bigger than life, and it was bigger than we were. It got to be bigger than what we were.
Sure, I believe when he was talking about it, he said the Road Warriors were the equivalent of an Andre the Giant.
That's probably right, and that's a great tribute, man, because Andre was still to this day in a class by himself. You ask people who they remember, it's Andre the Giant. You know what I mean? So
yeah, sure. We agreed wholeheartedly with that. Well, lastly, we have Road Warrior Animal here on WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. We're paying tribute to the 10th anniversary of the passing of Road Warrior Hawk, which just bypassed us on October 19th. So the last thing we wanted to do here was we wanted to give you an opportunity here. The floor is open to reflect back on your partner in any way that you would see fit, pay tribute to his legacy. Your legacy together is what was undeniably the greatest tag team in the history of professional wrestling. Any stories, any words that you may choose, the floor is yours, and we just thank you so much for joining us and doing this special tribute to Hawk with us.
Well, I think the thing I want to say, is hey, you can never replace Hawk, and there will never, ever, throughout the years of the wrestling business, be another Road Warrior so easy to do. You cannot create what we created. Because what we did, and the interviews that Hawk and I did together, nothing was scripted, nothing was ever talked about, everything was off the cuff, and you don't get that in today's wrestling. You know what I mean? Listen, the guy was my brother. He's going to be forever missed. He was uncle to my kids. I can't imagine him looking down and seeing my daughter with her son, or my son Joey with his daughter, with my grandkids, or watching my son James play for for St. Louis Rams. I mean, Hawk he'd be all over that. He'd love that like crazy with me. But it's just Hawk was a great guy. I'm sure Paul Ellering would tell you he'd be the first guy if somebody needed something, he'd give it to him, and if he couldn't give it to him, he'd borrow it from me. It's the Animal. Lend me $500. This guy's short money. I need to lend him $500. I'll pay you back. I mean, he'd give you a shirt off his back. That's just the kind of guy the way Hawk was. Hawk's the only negative thing with Hawk is that Hawk liked to be everybody's buddy and be in the party with everybody. And unfortunately, he trusted a lot of guys that at that time in the wrestling business, guys got upset when you took their spots or you were going to be the main event guy and different things. And if they can get you to screw up in any way, whether it was partying, drinking, or anything, that they would do that. But they couldn't take away the genuine good guy that he was. And at the end of the day, Hawk did a lot of you speaking with me, a lot of Christian speaking with me, and I call it the great race of life, man. It's not how you run that race, bro. It's how you finish that race. And he finished as top dog, and no doubt in my mind, he's sitting up there with great guys like Kurt Hennig and Brian Pillman, and we're having Rick Rude right now, and British Bulldog looking down on all of us, saying, hey, can't wait for you guys to join us up here because it's a good time. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, that's great to hear, and we thank you for being here with us to share these memories. We were just thinking, Steve and I had thought that it might be a fitting way, given that we were paying tribute to the Road Warriors, paying tribute to Hawk and your legacy here today. If we could get you before you signed off here, before we let you go, we know you're a busy man, could we ask you to maybe go back in time a little bit here and cut a classic Road Warrior promo to sign us off.
Millions around the world. There have been many imitators, but no duplicators. You can never imitate the Road Warriors, the one and only, the Animal, the Hawk, the Legion of Doom. Oh, what a rush.
Perfect. Fabulous stuff. Thank you. And, you mentioned your son, James. We wanted to wish him the best of luck playing for the Rams. He is one heck of a linebacker. We really enjoy his play. Even as a Steelers fan, I always kind of keep my eye out on what the Rams defense is doing.
Oh, man. Hey, I would love Dick LeBeau to grab him when the draft came, man, because he was really close to going with the Steelers. But, yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Man, that's great. Thanks so much, man.
All right, guys. Anytime you want to do another one, let me know.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Well, Scum, that was something. I mean, Road Warrior Animal taking a good hour out of his day to talk his career, talk about the Legion of Doom, specifically some great memories about Road Warrior Hawk. It's been 10 years since Road Warrior Hawk left us, and I think today was a great, great tribute to him, and we wanted to just thank Road Warrior Animal once again, man.
Absolutely, Steve. Like he said at the end there, I know you feel the same way speaking with somebody like that we grew up watching and remembering such special times. So many things that you didn't even know. I didn't know. Maybe you did. Some of the stories of the origins of the spikes and the face paint and their names and the different things like that. He summed it up best in that old school promo, my friend. What a rush.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, we had done a little bit of work getting the show together, and I think it just occurred to me a couple of things, having spoken with him today, about my own personality. I get really defensive to people that pick on other people. There's always good ball breaking amongst your friends, and, you meet new people, and you kind of push their limits a little bit just to see what their sense of humor is, and then they're just downright being a dick to somebody else or being condescending because you may know a fact specifically about wrestling. I get very defensive and I get very aggressive to people that bully other people, specifically on their internet. Ken Shamrock talked about those keyboard warriors. And I look back on it, and I really think the way he had talked about we're the bullies that bully the bully, I am in no way near the size nor the shape of either Road Warrior, Hawk, and Animal in any way, shape, or form. I'm just an average-sized guy, but I'm a tenacious SOB, and if I see somebody just picking on somebody else for no reason, I don't care how big they are or what kind of damage I'm taking, I'm going for them. And I think I understand now why. I think from watching the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, evolve as a tag team since I was a squirt, since I started watching wrestling, these guys were probably the most predominant two awe-inspiring guys that just simply rubbed off on a person and myself. So that was very interesting to hear him say that, and it kind of put a few things into my own mind about wrestling and about the wrestling fans into perspective. So that was fantastic. And the other thing is just simply going back and trying to envision in my head some of the crazy moments, not the, they call them now, the OMG moments or whatever, nothing like that per se, but just a couple of the reasons why I tuned in the following week was to either see how badly the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, were going to destroy their partner or their opponents the following week, or was somebody going to even make an effort to try to beat these guys?
Sure. Steve, to move back with what you were saying about they were the bullies of the people bullying people, I guess, again, maybe that brings a little bit of clarity as to our calling ourselves the most dangerous team in wrestling radio, because it's sort of what we do out there for the keyboard warriors. So I thought you were going to say, when you were giving the take on that, I thought you were going to break into a little bit of, you want to type and you want to insult someone, we don't care. You want to state your opinion, and you think that anybody else is going to give a rat's ass, we don't care, because we earn our money on wrestling radio the old-fashioned way, baby. We beat people for it.
Well, it's funny because I have this feeling. Yeah, well, no, I get really just aggressively minded, and I get upset when I see people that are clearly wrestling fans, and they've been fans for just like us, man, for years. And just because they didn't articulate a point that was very good, a very good point, and it just wasn't articulated well enough, or they misspelled something, and somebody's got to just jump on them and beat them up, verbally with words. Dude, what? That, to me, that really just gets on my nerves. You mentioned this on a show prior, the one with Ken Shamrock, because we had a ton of feedback over the last couple of episodes specifically with Larry Zbyszko and both of the Ken Shamrock shows. Very vocal crowd out there in the internet wrestling community, and we are not, myself and the Scum, I know we can speak for each other here, that we're not in any way the grammar police, or we don't have any sort of right at all. We're wrestling fans that just run a podcast, and we've been absolutely gifted and so lucky to have the guests that we've had. And I appreciate every show that we do, and every single person that listens to our show or writes, does little write-ups for us and stuff. That is fantastic, and it just gives us that motivation to get back on and do another great show. And, of course, today with Road Warrior Animal, we're going to get into some words from Paul Ellering here in a few minutes. And, of course, at the end of the show, we got Rachel Ellering joining us, kind of giving us her perspective on growing up, as part of the Legion of Doom in her house on Sunday mornings. But, getting back to what we're saying here is the bully. I will go out of my way to defend people when they make a good point, and I try not to, correct someone's grammar or the way they type something onto a keyboard. That person may have a lot more things on their mind than how they talked about, Tommy Wildfire Rich. So let's give some people some credit here for simply being fans. And let's not be, as a community, as a wrestling community, let's not be so apt to jump on somebody else's opinion just because it differs from yours. Because I can assure you of one thing, that if any of us in the wrestling community walked into a locker room in 1985 and said some sort of baloney like that to Road Warrior Hawk, you're getting your teeth knocked down your throat. That's for sure, 100%. And so I got a lot of respect for the guys that made the industry and made professional wrestling something that I know myself and you, Scum, have been avid fans, rabid fans, so to speak, for many years. And I want to be a wrestling fan for as long as I live and get my kids into it because it's great entertainment. And I just wanted to thank, once again, Road Warrior Hawk and Animal for, doing what they did to keep people tuning in each week, because I know myself, I'm certainly one of those guys.
Sure. Well, again, Stephen, like you said, you said, someone would catch one from Road Warrior Hawk, but by all accounts, we've spoken with Paul Ellering, we've spoken with Road Warrior Animal. Sure, if someone was out of line and someone was overstepping their boundaries and disrespecting, that was when you got something like this. But from all accounts, here, why not bring it back up? This is our tribute to the 10th anniversary of the passing of Road Warrior Hawk. Both Animal and Paul Ellering have said, both use the same terminology. The man would give you the shirt off his back. He was the nicest guy that you would write. If someone needed something, he would borrow the money from somebody else and give it to him. Paul Ellering, I'm sure we'll hear coming up and from his interview that he did with us, some of those moments that he recollects, some of the moments an Animal just spoke of. So, it's that's what it's all about. Like you were saying, they brought a lot of people, yourself included, like you were just saying, and made them fans, made them want to come back each week. I mean, no better way to put it than as JR would say when they, in their later years, even when they were back in the WWF, and he would call them, a couple of American originals, the Road Warriors, just like Animal just said. They didn't care about the different teams that kind of looked like them. Warlord and Barbarian had their look, and they were buddies. Demolition, I mean, obviously, that's where those gimmicks came from when they were brought about. But like he said, imitation they took as the biggest form of flattery. And that's because they were secure in who they were. They changed the game. There's never been one like them before. There will never be one like them after. And that, again, hence why you would have a tribute to somebody like that, like we're doing as fans, like you said, like we're doing for our fans, for the people over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook that, put their hard work into remembering the great days of wrestling that we all grew up with. For the listeners to our show, there's never going to be another Road Warriors, and there never was before them. So, we take this opportunity to have one half of that great team. We've had their manager, the brains behind the operation. We're going to hear his comments here coming up. We're going to hear from his daughter. And it's just a nice way to remember somebody who changed the game.
Couldn't have said it better, Scum. Absolutely. Great points there. And I know that we're going to have, there's a specific story that precious Paul Ellering took the time out to join us at WGD Weekly right when we started, doing this podcast, and some really good information came from that interview, and a lot of it was specifically based off of Road Warrior Hawk having passed and having had a moment for Paul Ellering to kind of have a few minutes to just give us some great stories. And he tells a story that we're going to hear here in just a few minutes on WGD Weekly about being in New York City and training in a gym, coming out of a gym, and you'll hear the rest here in just a couple of seconds, folks. But we wanted to say thank you. It's going to be a little bit of a different back end of our show today, where we usually do a longer recap and give our insights as to what we thought of our interview. I mean, how could you not just simply love what we just heard from Road Warrior Animal from start to finish? So I think that would probably be a little too long-winded on our parts. But Scum, you mentioned this as when we were putting the show together, and I thought it would be, now would be the time before we get into a great, excerpts of the interview with Paul Ellering. Give us what's your favorite moment that you can remember just off the top of your head from Road Warrior Hawk?
Geez, there's a lot of them, Steve. I mean, there's so many. I mean, obviously, as a fan over the years, you remember the classic moments we just talked about, whether it was them being involved in the war games, all this, I personally, on a personal level, tough to not say those days in the studio at Georgia Championship Wrestling when they would just run out there and, there was no introduction, there was no nothing, and they just wipe somebody out. Honestly, when Hawk really became a favorite of mine, and again, I don't think this is necessarily their best match ever, but there was a point in time when they were kind of using the Road Warriors in that feud with the Horsemen, and you might see him do some singles stuff. And I specifically remember, I mean, he didn't win the title from Ric Flair, but at the Bunkhouse Stampede that year, I remember it was one of the first pay-per-views that was available in our hometown, and I remember sitting down and watching it, and we didn't get NWA that much. We did get the TBS show. So I was really excited to watch, for the Battle Royal and the Cage, and I know it's not one of the greatest shows of all time, but the world title match on that was Hawk and Flair. And I just remember watching that, and, I'd always been a big fan of the Road Warriors. And again, for a singles moment, as we're saying Road Warrior Hawk, I remember him. To me, that was a special moment, and as a kid, I was so excited to be watching it. And I just remember, I think Flair got disqualified or something. He escaped with the title. But I just remember every move of Flair giving those chops and repeated chops, and Hawk just looking down at his chest, and then he'd press him over his head. Kind of reminded me what Animal said about him pressing Greg Gagne into the third row for a little respect. But he was just throwing Flair around, who was a complete bloody pulp. I mean, you saw Flair then here and there, and he would do the interviews, but there wasn't much of him on TV, and he was through the magazines and stuff, just this legendary champion. And I just remember Hawk just beating him. It had to be about a 25, 30-minute match from pillar to post. I mean, at least 5 or 6 press slams, all of his moves, everything. And Flair just got out of there. I mean, his whole head soaked in blood. Just a complete pulp, as classic Flair would be in a lot of those title matches. But to me, that's one of my first memories just of Road Warrior Hawk that'll always be special for me. Maybe not their best moment, maybe not the glitz of the War Games or a world title victory or the first Crockett Cup champions, but for me, I'll always remember that as a special moment when Hawk took on Ric Flair at the Bunkhouse Stampede that year up in Nassau Coliseum.
Great one. And again, now he's certainly more known for being a tag team man with Animal. But yeah, that's and he had a couple of other singles matches throughout his career that were, some would say, and we joke around the 5-star match and whatnot. I mean, who knows what kind of a star match it was, but it was an entertaining match. It was a match you didn't leave your television set for. You didn't go get a brew if you were at the event. So you're absolutely right there. Now with me, and again, I'm more of a spotty guy, and I've never really set in stone what are my favorites, this and that. There are a couple of things that I take away from Road Warrior Hawk is that above and beyond the promos, he was very articulate in his words, and you may not hear that if you just listen to a promo and listen to Road Warrior Animal and Hawk kind of go back and forth. And when they got to WWF, it was more of the tell 'em Hawk and he would go into a thing, but that was more of, I think that was either the evolution of their gimmick in doing their promos, or something that, came from a higher power that said, this is how we want you to communicate. that aside, some of the words he used were just spectacular. There was a promo. They were in the middle of a program with the Nasty Boys in WWF, and Animal had come up and said what he had to say, and he brings it over to Hawk, and he called them psoriasis. Like, who thinks of that word? You know what I mean? So there's a little bit more of an articulate tone to his promos that I always enjoyed. And again, going back to the early days where just those crushing moves. He had some really good moves, and you can never say anything bad about these guys, but, you know, something that you read on the internet is a lot is the no sell and this, but, you know, Animal talked about that, and he's like, you know what, pal, go ahead and kick me in the chest as hard as you can. I bench press 650 pounds. You're not going to kick me in the chest, and it's going to actually hurt. So in reality, was it more real for them to hop right up after a big power move from a guy that was half their size? Or was it more believable for them to sell that, you know, somebody that's, you know, 6 feet tall and 200 pounds could body slam this guy and actually hurt him? So, you know, that's a debatable point, I think, if you think about it. But, you know, the no-selling, getting right back up, looking you in the face and saying, you know, that didn't hurt me. And that fist drop, maybe one of my favorite moves in Glory Days of Wrestling of all times is the Road Warrior Hawk fist drop. Fantastic stuff. So, and he actually delivered one hell of a pile driver. But if I had to get right down to it, it was... And as I'm thinking about it here, I forgot to jot this down what event this was. It was either Wrestle Rock, Freebirds versus the Road Warriors in a cage, or it was a WCW event. Once again, Freebirds, Road Warriors in a cage, and they actually handcuffed Hawk to the cage at the end of the match, and it was a melee, it was a Donnybrook, and they bloodied him up pretty good, and very rarely, did you see either of the Road Warriors physically bleeding. But the promo afterwards, the passion that Road Warrior Animal delivered in concern for Hawk was, you know, very interesting to me. And even though Animal said the words, it was all about Hawk and how much he cared for his brother and how PO'd he was that at the time, you know, that vicious attack happened. So, very interesting stuff all the way around. Now, we you know, time being of the essence, we spent a good hour with Road Warrior Animal. We know your time's valuable at home, too, on WGD Weekly, so we're going to move right along. Scum, anything else you want to add? I'd love to be able to play a couple of the excerpts of Paul Ellering's interview as we move along here.
Absolutely. I just wanted to touch on what you were touching on with that no-sell. A big part of that Flair match that I remembered as a kid watching that to me was so impressive with Hawk. I remember specifically a suplex that Flair hit him with, and then got up, you know, turned in kind of a little strut. And when he got up, there was Hawk right on his feet, pulling his tights up, you know, adjusting them and just looking at him like, yep, you better come harder, buddy. I mean, that to me, that was great. I mean, I know people say that, oh, the no-sell. First off, the no-sell and fans and people saying that, I mean, again, no one was saying it then. It was like 1988, I believe. I think it was January of 88. The terms no-sell were behind the curtain. So at the time, it was just an impressive monster of a guy that you were like, wow, is he going to beat Flair for the title? You know, as a kid, that's what I was thinking. And when it's a tag team guy coming in, you don't think there's that chance, but it was that believable that he was that much of a monster. One other moment that I wanted to touch on that was later in their career that I just thought of while you were running through was just to prove, and Animal talked about how Vince McMahon said, nobody knows you guys up here when they first came in and they were talking about a name. Well, that's SummerSlam that they debuted in the Hart Foundation Demolition Best of Three Falls tag title match. And in the third and deciding fall, here comes the LOD out of the back, and they distract Demolition, and the Hitman and the Anvil won the titles. Philadelphia, that crowd went ballistic. Road Warrior pop, they call it. I'll never forget that. And that, had I thought of that off the cuff at the beginning, that might have been my moment. Even though, again, the classic NWA stuff, I know it's where they made their name, Japan, AWA. That, for all intents and purposes, debut on WWE pay-per-view when they came to the ring in that third fall was pretty special, too.
Yeah, it was dynamite stuff. That is awesome. And, of course, being led down the aisle by Precious Paul Ellering throughout most of their careers, we got him on deck, folks. And if you can hear the whole interview, go to our YouTube channel at WGD Weekly. It's about you can look it up. It's probably about a 90-minute total show. Myself and the Scum weigh in a lot. Very excited at the time brand new to the podcasting game, brand new to the interviewing game, and we had spoken with Leilani Kai prior. We spoke with a great interview and another real inspiring interview that we had with Scott Hudson, and he really kind of opened the doors to what we could maybe potentially do with this podcast. And then we get talking with Rachel Ellering, who's a fan of Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. And if you haven't tuned into that page, Scum always talks about it, and we're both, contributors to that page. It is something else, and it's a really, really good page, maybe the most accurate page on Facebook, and maybe even on the internet for classic wrestling. So check that out if you haven't been there. But beside that, Paul Ellering did so much to get the Legion of Doom on the map verbally, and some of the small nuances, and Animal talked about it with the sketching of the ring on a napkin. But let's go to it now. Let's give what Paul Ellering has to say about the Hall of Fame induction, of course, with Animal, the presentation of the Hall of Fame induction. Dusty Rhodes, of course, did the speech at the beginning. So we're going to take you to it now. Paul Ellering talking about Road Warrior Hawk.
To be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame is a tremendous honor, and also at the same time that year we were inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Amsterdam, New York. So both in 1 year was a tremendous honor, and everything to do with the WWE and the universe that they have there is it's always first class, and Vince called and said, you're going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and they just take care of you, first class, everything, first class seats down, limo at the airport, first class hotel, everything's paid for, and they do it upright. They really take care of you, and it's a tremendous honor to be recognized by your peers. You're to be enshrined forever into the Hall of Fame. It's just it's a pretty touching deal.
Yeah,
and then to be able to to talk about Hawk, that meant the most to me. Yeah.
We watched that recently, and we could see the emotion in both yours and Animal's kind of playing off each other when you were up on stage. That must have been an emotional moment.
Yeah, it was, because we missed them. And, we've been together for, at that time it was probably 28 years. We had a 20-year reunion in 2003, and they started in 83. And that was in June in Chicago, and then Hawk passed away in October, and we just missed him. Yeah, he was an awesome guy. He was the best of the best, and Hawk would give you the shirt off his back. I remember one time we were in New York City, right downtown there, by the 54th Street gym. And the gym was in an alley, and it'd go down the steps, and we went down the steps, and we worked out, and it was an old dungeon type gym. And we come out, and here's this, a guy that's just down on his luck, and he's leaned up against the wall, sitting on the cement there, and a homeless person, and Hawk just reaches into his pocket and gives him $50. That's the way Hawk was. He was the best of the best.
Wow, Steve, every time that I hear that, you can't help but the emotion just pours out of precious Paul Ellering when he talks about Hawk there. Very ironic, very, given the show here today centered around a tribute to the 10th anniversary of the passing of Road Warrior Hawk. Very interesting. Both Paul and Animal talk about Hawk being the kind of guy that he'd give you the shirt right off his back. I mean, Animal earlier we heard talk about he'd borrow the money to give it to someone, and there you have Paul Ellering. Guy sitting in the alley there outside of the gym. They walk out. He needs something. Hawk gives him a 50 spot and along on his way. Tough guys, badass, some of the most dominant people to ever set foot in the ring, but all in all, some great people, Steve.
Yeah, totally. Well, we go from 2 WWE Hall of Famers to maybe a future WWE superstar, and who knows, one day maybe she'll be doing an acceptance speech up there on stage somewhere at a WrestleMania saying thank you for getting her into the Hall of Fame. But before she does that, she's got to join us now with Steve and the Scum WGD Weekly. We got Rachel Ellering on the line. How you doing, Rachel?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Very excited. I'll tell you what, Rachel, this is a very interesting evening. Before we go any further, I guess myself and the Scum, we would love to just say thank you for facilitating that interview with your dad, a couple months back. That really got the ball rolling with our show. So I think that both myself and the Scum, I think we owe you a cold one if we ever head up to the Rock Tavern up near you.
Well, you guys are welcome. I'm a big fan of your page, so I was excited to see it happen. That
is very awesome. So, growing up in the Ellering household, I'm sure there's copies of the Wall Street Journal everywhere, sunglasses all over the place.
There's a few.
Tell us a couple of great Road Warrior stories from you as a kid walking around. Do they wear those shoulder pads like on Sunday working on the car? Or?
Sunday brunch, there wasn't too much like shoulder pads and face paint involved. But, growing up, my dad really just wanted us to see him as dad. And as I've grown older, I respect him a lot for that. And, it really didn't hit me until I was old enough to understand that what he and, my Uncle Hawk and Animal did, it wasn't really the basic job that people grow up to have. And so it especially hit me seeing, them get inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2011. And the moment their music hit and the fans started cheering LOD, I felt like I was somebody back in the 80s. You get goosebumps and you just, you hear the Road Warrior pop, and it was really unexplainable, and it was a beautiful moment, and it really showed me that, my dad had a big influence on this business, and it took until I was a little bit older to understand that.
That is fantastic. Now let me ask you, were you at the ceremony? Was that something you were able to be a part of?
Yep, my whole family was there, my siblings as well, and it was unbelievable. We also followed it up by going to WrestleMania and went to Access and all of that good stuff.
Sure. First, like Steve said, I'd like to echo the same. It's great to have you here. Always good to have anyone by the name Ellering here. We're both, Steve and myself, big fans of your father's work and very appreciative of you helping us out. And so we're real excited to have you here to help remember, like you just called him, your Uncle Hawk.
Yeah.
So I guess what we would like to have from your perspective, we heard some heartfelt words that your father had spoken with us a while back. We heard some great stories from Animal here earlier in the show. So I guess what we were hoping is maybe as part of our tribute here, you could recall some of your memories of your Uncle Hawk.
Definitely. Yeah, there are millions of them. And, as everybody knows, his voice is absolutely unmistakable. And I'm just thankful that, we have YouTube and everything to still hear that, because that's something I'll never forget, is hearing him, call up and ask how school was and just, hear it in his voice. And that's something I really miss. But so many more good memories than bad with Uncle Hawk. He'd do anything for anybody. And I know my dad mentioned that when he was on the show as well, but my Uncle Hawk, he was so giving. He would do absolutely anything for not only us, but people he didn't know. And so that's something that I've, taken as I've grown up, and I can, I try to emulate, because he was a beautiful person. And, I just remember visiting him down in Florida with his wife, Dale, and sitting by the ocean, and I think that was probably when, unless it was on my bed, the first time I ever took a bump was when he tossed me into the ocean. And so those are moments, hopefully not my last bump either, but those are moments I'll never forget, was, him just messing around with us, and, we were the all-stars on the card that night when we were with him, so it was unbelievable.
That's fantastic. Now, Animal didn't get you up on the shoulders, and he didn't come and hit you with that doomsday device, did he?
You know, I never got to experience that. I always wanted to do it on my younger brother or sister, of course. But, you know, as we grew up, it's something that it was fun to play around with.
Rachel Ellering with us here at WGD Weekly with Stephen the Scum. Again, great to have you here, Rachel. And you know, we kind of kid about it, and we got your dad's perspective on it, of course, on our show. I don't think we should probably go too further. I know I teased it a little bit in your introduction, but tell us about, you know, what your future is. Do you really have aspirations to maybe get into the WWE and be a diva, or would you want to be a manager? What would ultimately be your goal if you ever were able to get into the World Wrestling Entertainment?
Well, I only think about it 100 times a day, so yeah, it's absolutely something that I would love to do. And I'm naturally athletic, played 3 sports in high school, and, you know, now I'm a champion power lifter. And so it's kind of been a theme throughout my whole life is athleticism. But, you know, other than that, I think most importantly, I have a passion for the business. And, you know, some people lack that. They want to be there just, you know, to be on Monday Night Raw and be at the WrestleManias. But I love the business through and through. So I think that, you know, I could offer a lot. I think I could be a mouthpiece if they wanted me as a manager, but I like to think I could be the total package and take a few bumps as well.
Very good, very good. Well, we would certainly love to see that. Maybe we help you get the word out here with the interview, get you a kickstart. I guess more importantly, I've always thought the Divas division could use some face paint and some spiked shoulder pads. You think we might see you in any way with? I mean, I'm not suggesting the haircuts they used to have or anything, but
yeah, that's extreme. I think I could pull some stuff out of the closet. You know, a little bit of face paint, maybe not the hair, but, you know, I have a few Wall Street Journals sitting around here in my dorm room. So if the time came, I'm ready for it.
Very good. Do you have a T-shirt that says "Who's Gonna Beat Us"?
Believe it or not, I have the exact shirt that my dad wore that says that exact same thing on it.
Oh, that's fabulous. You know, I was going to add, the Wall Street Journal wouldn't be complete unless there was a lead pipe wrapped inside it.
Hey, that's secret business. No one needs to know about that.
That's right. That's right. So funny. Thanks for being a good sport with us here.
Have you at all, I was just wondering, have you touched base with anyone? Have you had any feelers out there as to possibly training to get into wrestling?
You know, I'm pretty close with Natty, and I have met her and had a few dinners with her whenever they're in Minnesota, and she's unbelievable. I mean, if I need any advice, you know, that I need from a girl's perspective compared to just asking my dad, I can ask her, and so it's great to pick her brain. And my dad's number one rule, and mine as well, is that I get my education first. And so I've got a year and a half left till I finish my bachelor's degree, and then after that, I really want to heavily pursue it. And so, you know, I've got to meet a lot of great people backstage whenever they're in Minnesota, and when we were down in Atlanta in 2011. And it's quite the roller coaster. Everything's happening really fast, and I'm excited about that. So I've gotten to introduce myself to talent relations and inform them on, you know, what I have to offer, and we'll see once I get a little bit closer to graduation where that goes.
Wow, awesome. That's great stuff. I'm sure a lot of the current talent that you have met, or whomever that is that you met when you drop the name Ellering, I'm sure most of them are familiar like we are with your father's great career. So, you know, hey, I believe when your father was on, he said something along the lines of that door is always open. So that's nice. It's nice to see someone that's so dedicated, that respects the business that much. You know, maybe you have a little head start, like you said, with Natty and with some of the current talent. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. But, you know, most importantly, I love my dad, and everything he's done is amazing. I am so proud to, you know, be his daughter and learn from him and have him as my hero. And but, you know, I don't want to get there just for my last name. I think I have way more to offer than that, and, you know, hopefully they can see that as well. But it is a bonus to be an Ellering. I get to hear a lot of great stories from everybody.
That is awesome. Well, speaking of everybody, let's throw a couple of names out there. Actually, better yet, why don't you kind of tell us, and granted you certainly have reason to tell us who your absolute favorite guys are. So that aside, Precious Paul Ellering, of course, and your words, in your words, Uncle Hawk and Uncle Animal, which I'm personally right now getting a great kick out of. That is awesome. Like, Uncle Animal. That's fantastic stuff. But, above and beyond that, I mean, you must have some sort of a library. You can watch some old stuff. And of course, being on the Glory Days of Wrestling, Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook, give us a little bit of insight as to who you kind of rooted for, or who you thought were pretty cool growing up watching wrestling.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has their list of, my top 10, my top 5, and, I've got kind of a tie at the top between, I mean, they had great feuds together, so it makes sense, but Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect, I cannot get enough of their matches from, 89 to, I think, 91 and 2. They just had brilliant matches, and I can't get enough of them, and Eddie Guerrero's amazing. I just think, his charisma came through at all times, along with his athletic ability. And, on the women's side, I am a huge Lita fan. I just think that she offered so much to, it was, the women's division back then. And I think she was so athletic, doing, Lita salts off the top rope, and, she'd come in and, do a few moves on the guys even. And so I love watching that. But, big fan now of, Natty, and I loved Beth Phoenix when she was there, so a lot of the powerhouse women. Sure,
yeah, Beth Phoenix, she could probably squat a truck.
I would love to work out with her and see if I could out-squat her.
She's got a couple of tree trunks under her. I think you might have, the chips might be stacked against you there for a little bit. But
well, I'm always up for a challenge, so if she's up for it, I'm up for it.
Well, hey, listen, don't forget to bring, a rolled up, we'll call it Wall Street Journal with you just in case. I'm just saying.
Gotta have it in your back pocket all times.
That's awesome.
If you learned anything growing up from the Road Warriors, learn from that bench press contest they had with the Warlord and the Barbarian. Never trust anybody. Never trust anybody when you're in competition.
Yep, I would not want to be in animal shoes in that situation.
Well,
I like to think, they had the brawn, my dad had the brains. I'm a little mixture of both, so I'd get out of the situation somehow.
If anything, run. If all else fails, there's always the chicken shit heel angle. Run out of the ring and disappear as quick as possible.
Yeah, that is very true, very true.
I've made a name for myself doing that.
Well, I'll take your guys' advice for now, and then once I get in the situation, I'll see how it goes.
Hey, never hurts. Never hurts to be prepared. We got Rachel Ellering with us, folks. This is an absolutely amazing night. We've had Road Warrior Animal on the show with us. We've had sound bites from our past episodes with Precious Paul Ellering. We got Ravishing Rachel Ellering with us now. I know Rick Rude's family may be a little upset with that, but listen, it's alliteration. It's Ellering. I don't think there would be a better name for a female Ellering. Her name starts with R. Precious Paul, Ravishing Rachel. I'm just saying, whatever it is, they're going to buy it and own it, and you have no choice in the matter anyway.
Very true. Very true.
You might as well keep it in Minnesota with the Ravishing one.
Exactly. Yes, I couldn't take the title of perfect, so we'll go with Ravishing.
It's funny that you said that, Rachel, because I would say Kurt Hennig and Bret Hart. Steve can vouch for me on this. Maybe get Ted DiBiase in there. Probably easily in my top 5 as well. So you have excellent taste.
Well, thank you. I like to think so. Their King of the Ring matches were amazing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very good point. And, the top 5 thing, and we were talking about it's kind of funny because, there's people that, and it seems like yourself and the Scum are I have a top 5, these are my top 5 guys. I'm a little bit older and crustier when it comes to stuff like that. So when I think about, I kind of give myself eras, top 5, top 5 in this era, top 5 in that era. I would have a hard time picking, I guess, because I'm just I'm an overthinker on things. I never really have had like my absolute favorite wrestler, but I think the Scum can attest, like if you do any sort of like huge power move including a vicious clothesline and or a big boot, I probably am a huge fan of that guy.
You're a simple man then.
Yeah. Just, I've used the term simple savagery on this show several times. And again, now, you don't need to do 300 flips off the top rope and land in some sort of crazy maneuver to get yourself over. Punch someone in the face hard and make it look real.
I can agree with you on there. I'm a big technical wrestling fan as well, so I like a little bit of a mixture, but I can see where you're coming from.
As a kid,
you were a Road Warriors fan.
Oh my God! Yeah, as soon as I saw those guys, I mean, I think Scum. I was probably, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, 83, 84 when they first came out. When I first got got to look at them on TBS. When they got to Georgia's, when I was able to kind of get a good look at them on somewhat of a weekly basis, and now Animal having obviously come in just a couple of weeks prior to Hawk. The main thing that I remember is that absolute vicious attack on Dusty Rhodes. That was one that sealed the deal for me to be a lifetime Road Warriors fan.
Definitely, yep. I have a soft place for Mr. American Dream. He is something else. He is a very, very sweet man, and he's really good friends with my dad. So,
you ever see old Dusty walking through the Rock Tavern having a cold one every now and then, or when he's up in Minnesota?
I have not, actually. The only time I've had the pleasure of chatting with him was when my dad got inducted, because he inducted them, and so that was a special moment.
Have you ever met Vince?
I have, actually, yes. I met him, when was that? I think it was last February. They were up here for SmackDown. And it was
How'd that go?
I wanted to tell him, you'll be cutting my paycheck soon, but I didn't have the courage quite yet. And so, but he was nice. He and my dad chatted, and, we just simply got introduced to him. But he seems like a good guy. I want to meet Stephanie.
Sure.
That's something else.
That was the next question I was going to ask when you said.
Yeah, I want to meet Miss Powersuit.
Sure. Absolutely. I could see where that is someone with aspirations and a real shot at it like you. I could see where that could be an intimidating thing. He probably would have respected the paycheck comment, but you never know.
It probably wouldn't have been the first time he's heard it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking he would have got that classic laugh out of him.
I could tell him, Vince, I earn my money the old-fashioned way. I beat people for it, and then just see how he reacts.
Yeah. Well, you never know with him now. Before you're even employed there, he's always been had a pretty itchy trigger finger with that. You're fired. So better safe than sorry.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it as long as it was backstage.
That's right.
Well, I know. You were mentioning Stephanie McMahon, certainly involved in today's storyline, and it's a special episode, and we generally talk the glory days of wrestling, but Rachel, we got you on the line, hopefully a future WWE, I'm going to call you a superstar. I'm not a particular fan of the word diva. I think that kind of undersells.
I'm not either.
They kind of undersell some of the work that the women do and certainly draw, and they do sell some tickets. So I think that's something pretty special and kind of underrated on today's programming. But that being said, Twitter is alive on Monday nights. And I know you're on there, so you're watching the current product. What are some of the things in today's product that you see that either remind you of, your dad and some of the things you witnessed, with the Legion of Doom growing up? Is there anything on today's show that you kind of see that reminds you of some things that you saw growing up?
Well, it's a tough question, but I think they're really trying to bring back the tag team division. And, Cody and Goldust have them right now, and I think they've been putting on some pretty darn good matches. And, Roman Reigns with the Shield, he's a powerhouse, and, his double spear last Monday kind of reminded me. I got a glimpse of the Road Warriors for just a second, and, with Paul Heyman on there on the mic, I think he's unbelievable. And so that kind of, brings me back a little bit. Those are the main things. I'd like to see, more action from the women, a little bit longer segments, instead of like 3 and 4 minutes, get it up to like 5 to 7 and use, use Natty a little bit more because I think she's a heck of an athlete and a heck of a wrestler. I mean, she comes from the Hart Dungeon after all, so can't go wrong there.
That being said, obviously you said you had a connection there with Natty. I was just wondering, as you were speaking there, you spoke of Dusty Rhodes a few minutes ago, and then you said how you respected the tag team work of Gold Dust and Cody. I would think you would kind of have a natural connection with a lot of those superstars. Did that shine through it all? I mean, like someone like Cody or Randy Orton or someone who's, grew up like you did, kind of watching from a distance, like, hey, that's Dad. But, when the lights come on, it's Cowboy Bob or the American Dream or in your case, Precious Paul or Natty, the Anvil. Did you have a natural connection with those people immediately, or was...
You do, because it's a lot harder for people who didn't grow up with their parents being in this business to understand it. It's a circus. They're gone all the time, and like you said, face paint and spiked shoulder pads. That's not what everybody's parents go to work dressed in, and so you do have kind of a natural connection because they just understand it, and they understand that you understand the business as well, and so especially with Natty, because she's a woman and her dad was, a tag wrestler when they were the Hart Foundation, and, her and I made a good connection about that, because her dad was, she's told me that her dad wasn't too excited about her being a wrestler, and, I think my dad's a little hesitant about it as well, but, it's just great to talk to, we've met Cody and Gold Dust, and, not when they were the tag team champions, but just a few months ago when they were up here in Minnesota, and, they know my dad, and it's just great to see everybody there now who still respects my dad and, can share stories about, their dad. Dusty was talking about my dad and, just kind of small connections like that.
Sure. Well, again, it might be tough to look at that way when you're growing up and it's your father, it's someone that you look at as dad. But in case you didn't realize it, it's pretty much universally spoken that was the absolute greatest tag team that ever set foot in a ring. So in case you think that your view of that might be a little diluted, being that it was Dad in their corner, I mean, I don't think you would get any argument.
But yeah, I am biased. They are by far my favorite tag team, and they always will be. But I know millions of other people share that same view as I do. Sure.
Absolutely. Well, Rachel, I was going to ask one. Steve had just asked how you were doing, but we'd be remiss if we didn't. He was one of our first guests on the show. How's your father doing? What is Precious Paul Ellering up to these days?
Oh, Dad's good. He, he's always busy with the bar up in Grey Eagle, and, I talk to him, usually every other night, and that's what he's doing. He's always there. He always likes to interact with everybody that comes through, and so that was pretty much it today. I got to tell him who I dressed up as for Halloween, and I'll give you a few clues here. I wore a nice suit coat with a Road Warriors t-shirt, some aviator sunglasses, and I was holding a Wall Street Journal. And,
Jim Cornette.
Yeah, you want to know what's funny? My dad said that exact same thing, and I was like, "No tennis rackets involved, Dad. Get that out of here." But that's exactly what he said. But he's always just up there working at the bar, and I'll see him this coming weekend when he comes to watch me lift, and that's always fun because nobody is a better teacher than him.
That is outstanding. And let me see if I can do this straight up out of memory. Rock Tavern, Grey Eagle, Minnesota, off of Big Birch Lake.
Hey, that's exactly it.
Boom. Check that out.
Right. That's right. You're dealing with a couple of professionals here.
I'm the amateur here. I see.
No, I got a funny feeling your career in wrestling, honey, is just getting started. I would not worry about that for a minute. We'll still be sitting here old and gray talking about you in 20 years on the telephone. That's for sure. I hope anyway.
Well, you guys, you'll be my very first interview then when I get up there.
That's awesome. As a matter of fact, call us the day before you sign the contract because they're going to own you after that. I know that the people that try to help us book shows here, and book our guests, and we got a great guy that does that. has a really tough time getting anybody that's on the not so much on the active roster, but essentially employed by WWE. You have to go through their I believe Scum. You have a better idea what the actual name of the
their media relations, and it's not an easy task, from what I understand, to get anyone, whether it's a Legends contract or whether they are selling ice cream bars in the concession area of WWE. It's tough to get them on the program. So don't forget the small people when you make the big time.
The night before I head down to Orlando, I will let you guys know.
That's fantastic. That is awesome stuff, Rachel. We are so happy that you called in and joined us tonight. We're talking all things Hawk. 10 years since the passing of Road Warrior Hawk Michael Hegstrand. We wanted to just take a few moments, dedicate a show to arguably, and I know that we got three folks on the line here, yourself, the Scum, and me. We all think the same thing. It's the best tag team that ever got into a wrestling ring that performed anywhere. And, I think we both felt when we were looking at when we wanted to do some shows and when we wanted to have some people on that this was something special that myself and the Scum have looked forward to now for a couple of weeks, putting it together. And, of course, this Sunday, November 3rd, this will be on the air. It's Halloween night. It's been a crazy night for everybody. So we just wanted to say thanks again for joining us. And are you a Golden Gopher? Do you go to University of Minnesota?
I don't. I go to St. Kate's. It's in St. Paul, so I'm just a few miles away from the U.
Oh, okay. Wanted to make sure we get a shout-out to your school. And you got some endeavors coming up now. Give us a little bit more detail as to what you have coming up this weekend. You said you had another competition.
Yep, I've got another powerlifting meet this Saturday, and it's called the Hudson Open in Hudson, Wisconsin. And I'm shooting to break 4 more state records. I'm going for another American record in my squat. I'm shooting for a 305-pound squat. And so I'm excited. It's a big weekend for me.
Awesome stuff. Well, I know myself and the Scum, we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you guys so much. This has been great. I know my Uncle Hawk would be very, very proud of everybody that's still here thinking about him.
Oh, yeah, he's got legions of fans, and again, that pun meant to be in there. Legions of fans that still love Road Warrior Hawk, love the Legion of Doom, Road Warrior Animal, of course, as well, joined us tonight. It's been an awesome evening. Scum, wrap it up, brother. What else you got, my man?
Well, just to echo what you were saying, Steve, just really wanted to thank Rachel for being here with us tonight. Wanted to thank Road Warrior Animal for joining us here tonight. Been an absolute thrill. It was, childhood favorite of ours, and Rachel was very helpful with us when the show was first getting off the ground, so it's great to finally talk to her and hear of her aspirations, and we wish her the best. I guess I couldn't see anything more fitting, and I don't know what kind of a sport she's going to be here, but I think the most fitting way to send off is, Rachel, can we get a what a raw shot of you on the way out the door here?
Just for you guys, because I love your page that much, I'll give it to you. Oh, what a rush!
All right.
Yeah, that was awesome. Rachel Ellering, ladies and gentlemen. You'll be seeing a lot more of her in the near future. Some fantastic stuff tonight. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us. That music's hitting. It's time for us to roll out. We're going to go. I know, personally, I am going to go annihilate my kid's candy because he's not a candy guy. He pulled out about 2 packages of Skittles. I'm going to take a bath in some Reese's Pieces.
Are you ever in contact with Big Johnny?
With animals?
No, his brother, People Power.
People Power. No, I'm not. We talked to him a few times backstage last time we were at the shows here. But I don't keep in contact too closely with him. No,
so he's still involved. I would imagine with the company in some capacity, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure of his exact title. I know he's not talent relations anymore. I'm not sure of the exact thing that he does, but he's still back there.
Yeah, I was actually a fan of that spiel that he used to drum off on Raw when he would do the interim General Manager of Monday Night Raw and Executive Vice President of Talent Relations. I could see the Scum holding down that position, to be honest with you.
Oh,
you'd have to add your last name, though, Big.
That's right. I mean, that was one that your father threw out there way back when. You know, I told him the same thing. You know, he was wondering, is that shortened? And I said, well, shortened from what? And he said, from bag. And I said, well, you know, it all depends on who you're speaking with.
Depends on who you're talking with, yep. Thank you guys. You guys are great. I'm a really big fan of the page, like I said, and I love it. I look at it every day, so you guys should just keep up the good work.
We're going to do our best. What do you think, Scum?
Absolutely. You keep up the good work, too, and we'll make it a pact here that we'll talk to you the day before you head down to Tampa. How's that?
That sounds great. I really appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Best of luck to you, Rachel. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You too.
You too. Scum, it's been a wild ride tonight, my friend. We have Road Warrior Animal. We had words from the great, precious Paul Ellering. And, of course, I don't know, Scum. It sounds like to me like young Rachel Ellering has quite a future in World Wrestling Entertainment. What do you think, my man?
Sure. I mean, why not? Like I was saying, when she brought up the Rhodes brothers, it made me think, you know, she's got a lot in common with a lot of people up there. You know, she seems dedicated, and she seems like she's got her head on straight, wants to get that education first. So it seems like a smart girl and a driven girl. So why not? Again, hey, she can pull a What a Rush. You heard it here. So why not? You know, who better?
Oh.
Who's gonna beat her?
Well, like I said, anybody that walks to the ring with a rolled-up Wall Street Journal, you better beware. That's one heck of a tough cookie and a smart one at that. So it's great to have had her on. A lot of insights and great stories about Road Warrior Hawk from being a kid. Scum, I think it's about time to wrap it up for the night. We had a great dedication to Road Warrior Hawk, of course, the Legion of Doom. Thanks, everybody, for joining and listening to us. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, of course, on the eve of the Ken Shamrock return. That got a lot of activity with Brian Clark. Wrestling Inc. has slowly become, or actually quickly become, maybe one of our biggest supporters, getting us, getting the articles out there. Thanks so much to everybody on that website, not only the staff, but the readers there for commenting on all the things. We greatly appreciate the diverse comments. Of course, everybody's going to have their own opinion about wrestling, so we implore you to leave yours on our page, WGD Weekly on Facebook, WGD Weekly at WGD Weekly on Twitter. You know, follow everybody. The more wrestling you can get, the better, especially that good classic stuff, huh, Scum?
Absolutely. And next Sunday, we have another big show. It's getting to be commonplace around here. Be remiss if we didn't bring up another WWE Hall of Famer coming down the chute for you next week, when we'll have a member of another classic tag team from even before the Road Warriors, member of the Valiant Brothers, the Boogie Woogie Man. Jimmy Valiant will be with us next week, Steve. And until then, I guess it's about time we sign off.
You got it, man. Ooh, mercy, Daddy. We'll leave you with that, folks. You hear that music? That means it's time for us to roll out. Thanks so much once again for joining us at WGD Weekly, Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly with Steve and the Scum. Till next time, folks, what a rush.
What a rush indeed. Have a good week, people.